As we tell our story, our desire is to show God's hand through all of the moments. We firmly believe that we were created on purpose, for a purpose, by a loving, intentional God. We often don't get to choose the circumstances in our stories, but we do get to choose our reactions, and our desire is to do the next right thing for the glory of God.
Welcome to the Ministry and Podcast, authentic conversations about lament, endurance, and hope. This podcast is a production of the CCL Network.
We've been serving in lay ministry for over 30 years in various ways, ranging from small group leaders to elder and chairman of the board and women's Bible study teacher and church treasurer. My name is Stephen.
And my name is Jenée.
And this is our story of ministry
and perseverance.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us again on the Ministry and Podcast. I'm Mike Edmiston.
And I'm Heather Walton. And we have two special guests on our podcast today. We've got Stephen and Jenée, and they're going to share a little bit of their ministry story.
Our story begins on the evening of July 3rd, 2020. And during this point in time is when COVID happened, the world was shaken quite a bit, and things were turned upside down in our own personal lives as well as in many churches, struggling to figure out how do we move forward. And during this evening, we had a regularly scheduled leadership meeting where we would once a month have our elders and deacons come together as part of the leadership team. I was chairman of the leadership team, and we would do regular ministry updates, financial things, whatnot. But this time was a little bit different, where we wanted to talk about how do we continue ministry to moving forward in the midst of COVID and lockdowns and whatnot. During this time, we were reviewing our small groups, how they had gotten together and watched the live stream like a lot of churches did, and also wanted to get input from the wives there too. So they were invited to there, as well as a few other guests that came in and listened into our conversation. And during this meeting, one of the three elders stood up, and I'm going to call him the rogue elder. He stood up and he pointed his finger at me and he said, "Shame on you, shame on you, shame on you." And he went on to personally attack me, attack our senior minister, attack our family life minister, attack our other elder, attack our family in different ways. And during that time, I was thanking God, help. I need words here to do what is right in your sight, to not let whatever's going to happen right in front of me derail what God has been doing. And just was paralyzed for a few moments of just trying to think, what do I need to do in this situation to lead us through this moment?
And as the wife of a leader, oftentimes we aren't the one in front of the congregation. We're the one sitting in the pew, listening to whatever's going on, sitting in the meeting. And oftentimes you get to hear your husband, the person that you're closest to, being attacked. And there isn't a way in that moment for you to respond to that. Personally, I think it's easier if I was attacked rather than my husband or my kids be attacked. Mm-hmm. And those people were never attacking based on anything with doctrine. It was always opinions. It always became a personal issue, a personality issue versus anything that we could take back to Scripture. And it was always so difficult as the wife, because you're the one who sees the hours that no one else sees spent in prayer over the congregation, shepherding the flock, dealing with situations that nobody else wants to deal with, loving people that aren't easy to love, and trying to handle and take care of the bride of Christ, because that's so important. And in that moment, on that night, there was a room full of people and no one stood up. No one stood up to defend my husband, my family, our other ministers. Everyone just let this person continue an attack that was just out of anger. And as we sat there, this is the church that we had been part of for 18 years. It's where we'd raised our kids. It's where we baptized our kids. It's where we'd had our daughter's funeral. It's the place we'd laughed. It's the place we'd cried. It was the deepest relationships at our lives at that point were in that congregation. And it felt like, how are we here where no one is willing to stand up in this room and say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? This isn't how we should do this. And we've always done ministry together. and always felt like in Luke 12, it talks about to whom much has been given, much is expected. And we were raised in Christian homes, not perfect homes, but Christian solid homes. And we felt that we needed to steward the talents, abilities, experiences that we had and serve for the last 18 years in the local church. And now it felt like something was changing.
And, as I zoom out from that story, like, how did we get here? How did everything happen to get to that point where there's an explosion in front of you and all these things happened that, like, what did I miss? What was going on in the background there? And like a lot of small churches, if I look back over the past 10 years before that, we'd seen a change in the culture, people leaving town for various reasons, people not coming into the church that they used to. And we watched the congregation shrink from around 120 on a Sunday to 100 to 90 to 75, and we're down to about 50 on a Sunday. And then COVID happens on top of that and shakes, your expectations. And there are additional hurts and struggles that come into that. And while we were working through all of those pieces and trying to figure out how do we do ministry in the midst of COVID and live stream and all the other pieces, we started putting together like, hey, let's let our small groups get together at churches, right? We're a little bit isolated. Let's have some interactions there. Let's have some ministry, some conversations. Let's watch the live stream. Let's do communion. Let's have a meal together at the end and build that community in different ways. And over those times that we were starting like, oh, we can kind of get back into a groove here. And as I'd mentioned that we were going to talk about, hey, how should we move forward in that July meeting? Well, in June, we actually went through and talked with the groups like, what's your feedback? What are you thinking? What are ways that we can build upon this? And the rogue elder had talked with, I'm going to say, kind of our older segment of our congregation. And during that time, he opened up a can of old hurts and old wounds, right? We had that COVID frustration there, but let me say, what do you think about church? And then we talk into, what do I think about the senior minister? What do I think about this? And opened up a whole can of hurt that he somehow took on himself and felt like he needed to personally lead and wage war against others and being deceived by Satan there. And we had another elder and I heard like, hey, he had some things he wanted to talk about, didn't want to talk with the other ministers. So we sat down with them and said, hey, what are the things that you've heard? And actually not much came out of it. Like, there's a couple of youth things. There's a couple other things, but they'll work themselves out. And it's like a lot of nothing. And so then 2 days later, we have this huge blow up that comes and blindsides me of like, oh, I thought things were kind of okay, but I guess not.
I heard a quote this week that says, leadership is signing up to be misunderstood. And we had experienced several of those things over the 18 years of being in small church ministry. And we always felt like, okay, God, is there something else we should be doing? And we always came back to like, no, this is where you're supposed to be. This is where you're supposed to be serving. And as this meeting is going on and we just continue to feel like all of these things are welling up, how do we continue to stand strong in the midst of this? How do we continue to do what God has called us to do when we are being personally attacked in a way that we hadn't previously? And again, we just looked around. I mean, this is a room filled with people that we've done ministry with for years, and everyone was silent. Everyone was silent. Everyone was silent. Everyone was silent.
There really is nothing like the church when it's working right, and nothing worse than when it isn't. The key to church growth is church health, and the key to a healthy church is found in creating healthy systems. At the CCL Network, we are fully committed to helping churches thrive by enabling them to do an assessment of 7 key church body systems. This fantastic and customized data enables you and your church leaders to make good decisions instead of guessing that will maximize church health and impact. The CCL Network will be hosting various one-day church health clinics around the country in 2026, where more teachings and resources will be shared, and you can even join a healthy church co-op with other churches in your area with 12 months of personal coaching. For more information and cost, contact our Healthy Church Director, David Vaughn. at david.vaughn@ccleadership.org. That's david.vaughan at ccleadership.org.
Everyone was silent. Everyone was silent. No one stepped into that void to speak any words of truth. And it didn't feel like, I didn't feel like I could in that moment, because it would have come across as just an argument, because obviously everyone knows I'm going to defend my husband. And that wouldn't have been seen as maybe genuine, a genuine refute of the argument, of the concerns. And so we began to look around, and as the meeting broke up and people just kind of went their separate ways a little quietly, and people began to talk about, like, well, we know that was bad, but can't we all just get along? Can't we just ignore what just happened and to not address it? And we began to see this theme of people were more concerned with being comfortable than they were about holding to truth, calling out sin, and doing the hard things that might need to happen.
God had led me after that to a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time in reflection. Like, is there some planks in my eyes that need to be pulled out? And as I've learned over the years in leadership, it's great to have godly men around you to give you wise counsel. And if you're in a situation like this, asking some people outside of that group to understand the story, understand the hurt, understand what's going on, and give you that wise counsel. So definitely, I sought those individuals out. I felt that God had put upon my heart a scripture in Philippians 1:27 that says, whatever happens, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. I know that I can't control anything else. I can control me. And some days I struggle with this controlling me. And so God asked me, hey, you need to make sure that you're leading in integrity. And during that time, I met with our elders. Well, I met with the one elder that was, and some of the deacons and their wives, the ministers and their wives, to begin to have some understanding, looking through some of the attacks that were going on, and then also spent some time talking with the rogue elder. And during those 2 phone calls I had with them, the attacks continued on me personally. He was sorry for losing his temper, but he wasn't sorry for anything he said, any of the accusations, and he piled on more accusations while we were talking and said, I'm not stepping down. You need to do what you need to do, but I'm not stepping down. So again, the gospel was not used as a foundation. It was, hey, here's my feelings and emotions and this hurt that he had somehow taken on, and just wanted to continue to drive things through to some conclusion that he was looking for that was not part of God's plan or the best interest of the church that we're supposed to be defending and protecting and shepherding forward versus dividing and causing more hurt on top of that.
Stephen, that really just highlights how important it is for leaders to have a high emotional emotional EQ, that emotional intelligence, that self-awareness, that knowing how to process hurt, because in leadership, you are going to process other people's hurt. And it sounds like instead of processing it, he just reflected it, and you received it. So I can resonate strongly because I've been on the receiving end of those things where, and Jenée, you said, if you're signing up to be a leader, you're signing up to be misunderstood. And the older I get, the truer that becomes, because no matter how, when I was a lead pastor, no matter how much I thought I explained something, no matter how well I thought I explained it, no matter, I hit every possible point of contention, every question, my words were still taken out of context. They were completely ignored. I was totally misunderstood. And what I learned is there's some people that aren't seeking to understand. I mean, they're legitimately not seeking to understand. They are seeking to see their agenda move forward. And that sounds like the situation that you guys were dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think as we, at this point in this is, July 2020, we're a couple weeks in now, and we began to discuss between us and with the other elder and his family that we were on the same page with, like, okay, what happens if we aren't able to get this to a point where sin has been called out? We're not driving a single agenda. We're trying to do what's best for the church. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for our leadership? And we began to talk about, at some point in your life, everyone's life, there's going to be this line in the sand that we know that if it crosses this line, we can't continue in this direction. This is the place where we have to draw the line and where we have to stand for truth and call out sin for what it is. And so we began talking, like, where's that line for us and what does that look like?
And lots of conversations there. So that meeting happened on a Monday night, right? Sunday's coming. I know, right, as the chairman, I need to lead. I need to address sin. And so getting input in, again, lost sleep, lots of prayer, brokenness, heartache, all those emotions, Mike, as you talked about. And so that Sunday came, and that Sunday we actually invited a few more people into the church, right? Also still struggling with COVID, and had a little different service there, and it was shorter. And after the service, we actually asked the congregation, hey, here's some of our thoughts, some of your thoughts. And it was actually a very productive time of like, hey, you know what? The service can look different, and that's okay. And it was some time of just reevaluation and growth by different people. And so it was decided, hey, we're going to try this hybrid thing of coming in and having some discussions. And then right after that, I needed to pivot and to be the leader that would say, okay, here's sin, we need to address it. So I pulled the elders and deacons together, and we had a hard leadership meeting after that. And there were 4 deacons and 3 elders. And according to our bylaws, so again, we've got our scriptures, but we also have our bylaws too. And it says in order to remove someone, that you need to have a unanimous vote of all of those present, minus the person you're removing, to remove them. And I knew that our deacons needed to wrestle through this. And so again, going through scripture, 1 Timothy 5:19 through 21 is very clear on elder responsibilities. It says, do not entertain an accusation against an elder unless it's brought by 2 or 3 witnesses. But those elders who are sinning, you are to reprove before everyone, so that others may take warning. I charge you in the sight of God and in Jesus Christ and the elect angels to keep these instructions without partiality and do nothing out of favoritism. So that was the root of, hey, here's what we need to do to address biblical sin by an elder. Also, there's Matthew 18 that talks about conflict, and talk through with the group, hey, here's what the scriptures say. And after again talking, let him talk and really use more personal accusations, some smaller, hey, I've got issues with these small things, but not a biblical root thing. It's more of an opinion thing. And then I went around to everyone like, okay, it's time to say, hey, where do you stand? And I remember watching them. I'm very much on handouts and documents, like, hey, let's make sure we're all on the same page. And I remember watching one of the deacons take the document that had the biblical words on it, putting it down and starting to lean on his understanding, like, oh, was this really bad enough for this person to be removed? Is my opinion bad enough of this that they should be removed? And after some back and forth, one of the other deacons asked me, say, Stephen, what are you going to do if we were not unanimous? And we had already had the conversation that we can't be part of this body if we're not willing to address sin, and especially this attack that had come on so blatantly that so many people had seen it. It wasn't just us, us in a corner. It was, all the leadership team, their spouses, and several people in the church. So it needs to be addressed either way. And so I said, we'll have to step down and walk away if this is going to happen and not going to be addressed. And so in the end, 3 deacons said, yeah, I think that was bad to do, but it doesn't rise to the level of removing someone out of eldership. And at the end, I said, okay, I'm sorry, but we're going to pull ourselves out, not immediately, but we're going to pull ourselves out. We got a few things to walk through and pull ourselves out from that body of Christ. And they weren't happy to hear that. But as I left the meeting, like, this is the consequences of not addressing sin.
And while this meeting is going on, the other elder that was in agreement with us, his family was at our house, and we were sitting around the table. And I can still, even 5 years later, see the look on Stephen's face when he walked back through the door, because we were waiting to see what had happened. We all knew what was going to go on in this meeting. And if you're married, your spouse is the person that you know best, and often you can communicate without even using words. And he walked in the door, and I immediately knew what had been the outcome of the meeting. And so we in turn had to explain to our 4 kids that the only place they knew as church, the only place they had ever worshiped, we were no longer going to be a part of it. And they knew some of the details of what had happened. Obviously, they weren't a participant in the meeting that at the time. They had not been involved in the discussions. But the impact to us was huge, but also the impact to our kids and to the other elder and his family. And, this was also Stephen's home church. This is where Stephen grew up. We moved away and done life and ministry in another church for several years, but we really felt God calling us back to the small rural church. And so this wasn't just ministry, it was family.
Life.
And our goal then at that point was, okay, now what? And we know that in Romans 6:23, it says the wages of sin is death. And for us, that meant the death of ministry, the death of relationships, the death of community. And what happens now?
And,
sin has consequences, and we always talk about the horizontal consequences, of God's wrath and how Jesus took that for us. But man, the vertical consequences. I'm sorry, we always talk about the vertical consequences, but there are horizontal, relational consequences to sin as well. And I just want to applaud you guys for making such a difficult decision, but saying this is the line. And, integrity requires us to hold the line, knowing that integrity was going to come at great cost. And anytime you are in a leadership role in the church, there will come a point where your integrity is tested. And it's going to be easier to compromise. It's just guaranteed that is going to happen to anyone who leads, whether it's a staff leadership position, whether it's as an elder, any leadership position at all. There's going to be that temptation to compromise, and it's going to look easier. And I just want to applaud you guys for taking that stand and saying no, we are going to call sin. And we know it's going to hurt, but this is the right thing to do. So good on you guys for that. That was incredibly hard.
Yeah. And can I just say, I can relate to you, Jenée, in a lot of ways that I can't even begin to describe for this short time. But could you just walk us through a little bit more of that disillusionment, the disorientation that it feels on your spirit when something like that happens, and then that process of discernment that you had to walk through quickly in real time to be able to make that decision and know where you stand and what your foundation is and how you were going to move forward with the Lord?
I think God had given us many personal moments in our lives where we had things where it felt like God was silent, or where you're like, okay, where are you in the midst of this? And you get to practice. Can I walk what I say I believe? It's really easy to say words, but am I willing to put my feet to that? Am I willing to let my actions line up with what I'm saying? And so this felt like, in a very public way, we were getting to do that. I am much more emotional than my husband. And oftentimes Stephen's favorite phrase to me is God still on his throne? And a lot of times I'm like, I don't want to hear that right now. I know he is, but I just want to sit in this for a little bit, okay? And so I will say, without a strong leader, this is something that could have easily derailed us, because it was so personally hurtful. And when you're in a small congregation, there's not that many people. There's lots of dual relationships.
Yeah.
You're not just the boss, you're also the
Yep.
friend, you're not just the, And so how do we wade through almost disentangling that? And I will say there were lots of tears shed. I'm a crier by nature, and lots of moments of anger because, again, it still felt like no one was defending us. But I'd been a Christian long enough. We'd walked through enough things that in my heart of hearts, at the end of the day, we knew that God was still in the midst of it. And it's just going back to building that faith little by little, like reading the Bible and believing it's true and doing it over and over again. We get to choose each day what we're going to do with that.
And from my point, Mike, I appreciate your words there. In leadership, right, God gives you the building blocks for that next thing. So one of the quotes that we like is God is preparing you for the things he has prepared for you. And in this,
Yep.
there have been other struggles in the church. The first year that we came back here, God had opened my eyes to the senior minister being addicted to pornography and other things. So we went through the removal process of the senior minister at that time. And so hurt had been kind of a theme in the midst of here. And the goal is the opposite of shame on you. It is, right, as Christ calls us, hey, I'm calling you out of sin to turn and then no more, like he did with the woman at the well. And so that is the hand of Christ versus the finger of condemnation, of pointing, and that's what Satan does. And so through different circumstances and situations, actually, the leadership team had done fairly well, right? Not right. Got all the human emotions in there, but I had hope that, everyone, after they had some time to process, like, hey, here's the right thing to do. But unfortunately, in this situation, it was different. And even in my spirit, I felt this is different. And God is the one that is sovereign over all things. That I tell Jenée, right? I have to realize that too. And I'm doing the best that we can. And then I have to leave the details in God's hand. What are you going to do from this?
Yeah. I mean, we are called to faithfulness. We're not called to manufacture outcomes. We have to be faithful, but the ultimate outcome is not in our hands. And just as you guys are talking and describing this, if someone has only been part of larger churches in their life, this probably isn't going to make a lot of sense. But this is, if someone is in a smaller church, they're going to get this wholeheartedly, because in that smaller church, in a larger church, the influence of any one person gets really distilled, But man, when you're talking a church of 50 people, one person, especially a power broker elder, can just have enormous sway. And that's going to be more and more the case, because the average church size in America now is in the 60s. I mean, it's like, I think I read this week, it's like 67. So this is normal life in a lot of churches and a lot of ministries. And small church has a lot going for it relationally. I mean, there's so many good things that happen there. This is the other side of the coin, that one person can have an outsized influence, and you had to deal with that. So as we talk about, okay, you guys decided we cannot be part of this body of believers anymore, and untangling all that relational mess. Let's pick the story up there. What happened after that?
One of the things I think I mentioned before, that God had said, hey, you need to make sure that you are not saying anything, that you're controlling yourself. And one of the things is that we walked away from that bride in that church. God impressed upon my spirit that, hey, this is the bride of Christ. You're not going to say anything bad about her. You're not going to worry about defending yourself. I'm your defender. I'm your protector, right? You walk in the way that I tell you to, and all the other things you walk away from. So as you know, in small communities, small towns, right, there are all those opportunities for gossip, for backstabbing, and God told me to seal my mouth and to not add into any of that chaos. And so we walked away from that in integrity. We went through the process of me stepping down, allowing the deacons to step up, allowing Jenée time to step out of being the treasurer and the accountants, right? That's right. Again, dual relationships inside of there, and all of those pieces.
And it was honestly probably easier for Stephen to walk away from being the chairman of the board and the elder than it was for me to extract myself. I had been assisting with the accounting side of the church for about a decade. And in the last 5 years, I'd been the main treasurer. So I was paying the payroll, doing all of those things in a volunteer role because I'm an accountant by trade and I felt like God had gifted me a way to help in ministry. And so to be able to untangle all of those pieces. So it took us a couple months to be able to do that so that I could, again, feel like we had done everything that we could do to set them up for success. And to
But man,
hand off.
how awkward was 2 months? That is a long exit. Man, that had to be so difficult.
Now, during that 2 months, we were not attending church.
Okay.
We were not going on Sundays there. We were still, that's kind
behind
of
the scenes.
Behind the scenes. That was kind of another piece of the story. But so we were doing this through meeting, but it was still awkward. These are people that in theory, we'd been doing ministry with for years, and suddenly it's this tenuous relationship. Nobody's trying to say anything to upset anybody. And
it's kind of like going through the divorce process. Not that we've gone through that, but it's so many emotions and painful. Like, hey, I need to communicate this or talk about that, and very difficult, Mike.
And Stephen decided that he should stay as the elder in charge until I was done and could walk away from the treasurer responsibilities because he felt that was protection over me.
Yep.
And not leaving me to what was going to be left. And so as a wife, his first responsibility obviously is to God, but his second is to me. And he did a really good job of protecting our family as we walked through that. And so on September 1st, he officially handed in his resignation. I handed over, when you're talking a small church, we're handing over keys to the building. I'm handing over the checkbook and all of the records and then walking out the door and going, okay, God, what's next?
And that's a memory. So as you leave something, right, you literally walk through the door and that door closes. And then the question is, hey, God, what do you have next for us?
Yeah. So what emotions were going through your minds, through your hearts as that door was closing?
I would say brokenness, right? Your identity, like our identity is in Christ, but you have an identity like I'm part of this. So it is recasting that identity. What are our norms anymore? What does our relationships look like with those people that, hey, I don't have any hard feelings against these individuals, but they're not part of my body anymore. And what does that look like? And so there's some awkwardness in some conversations. And in a small community, right, you run into people. So it's there. I think one of the hurts coming out of that is people didn't come and knock on the door and say, hey, can I talk to you? How you doing? Like it was pretty much, it was crickets as we walked through those, honestly, after that last door, like it was crickets. And a couple of people we'd seen like, hey, I miss you. I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand you miss us being part of it, but there's no effort in that relationship or reaching out or anything like that. And I get there's some awkwardness there, but it also gave us perspective for those that have left the church. Oh, I understand where you're standing right now. So it gave us a different perspective that we hadn't had before.
Yeah.
And I think that other piece, it felt like our world just shrunk. We live in Illinois. So Illinois and COVID was very locked down. Nothing was really going on. And so suddenly we didn't even have what had been the place that we were at twice, 3 times, 4 times a week. Our kids half the time felt like they lived in the church building between all the different things that we were involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And so our world just suddenly got really small. And at the same time, just a couple weeks after everything ended at the church, one of our very best friends passed away from brain cancer, actually 5 years ago today. And we stood at his funeral singing the song, Is He Worthy? And we left the funeral. And the next night when we got home, because they live a ways, and so we had to drive and stay in a hotel. And we came back the next night and we began to, we'd always prayed before bed, but it felt, because of everything that had happened at the church and because of what we'd walked through with Mike and his family, that everything suddenly felt more serious. And so we got on our knees every night, and we've continued that habit since then.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, God, we don't want to waste what you've given us. We just watched our friend die way too young. And he went out saying, God is worthy no matter the pain that it's caused me. And it's like, where are you going to take us next? And so it felt like God was just kind of pressing into that idea, that brokenness, pain, like there were so many things in our lives that's where we felt like we were in that moment.
There's so many times when we get to those broken moments, we do just want them over. I mean, we want to just open the door, like, let's go, this is next, let's, pedal to the metal. And a lot of times God just lets us sit in that. And it's not till the benefit of hindsight that you look back and realize the work that he was doing in you during that season of brokenness, this season of seeming waste, of, it didn't have to be this way. Why is it all these questions that seem to have no answer, and you just sit there? How did that grow your relationship with God and your relationship with his church? Because his church was the source of a lot of this hurt. So what did that look like?
I think for our relationship, it allowed us to grow together and to, I would say, have some deeper conversations. So sometimes you just get into the rhythms and the grooves, right? And right, COVID changed some of that, but also, hey, leaving church and some of those other things that have been taking our time and our efforts, it changed some of those. So we had some deeper conversations. We also spent more time in prayer, like, okay, God, what is next? And just spending time before his throne. I think the other piece for me is brokenness. We understand that in various different ways. And this was another season of brokenness. And like you said, you don't get through it quickly. And there's a reason for it, that God is working in you, right? There are things that, hey, what do I need to grow? Or maybe what do I need to die to in order to be that man, that woman, that family that God has called us to be?
And obviously we were also like, what was our role in this? Is there something that we could have done differently? Because no matter what, you don't ever want it to blow up the way that it did. And so trying to reevaluate that. But in the midst of this, God allowed us, we had already been meeting in a small group in our home. And so the other elder that walked away at the same time in his family, and then another family. So there were three of us. And for that first 9-month period after this happened, God really gave us a space. And at the time, it kind of felt like we were just, I don't know, keeping time, marching in place, because we didn't really know where God was taking us next. And we felt surely God was going to show us. There was going to be a big ray of sunlight or something that, broke through the clouds, and we were going to know what happened next. And looking back, we realize now, like, it was such a time to allow us. We weren't just marching in place. God was giving us time to heal. God was giving us time to grieve what we'd lost, but we also felt safe because we also didn't realize there was this weight that lifted. We didn't realize how much weight we've been carrying in leadership. Every time you walked through the doors of that small church, somebody's going to complain. Somebody's going to be upset about something. Somebody's going to assume that you made the decision that they didn't like. Maybe our kids didn't do or say whatever they were supposed to say, and you don't feel that in the moment, and we don't regret those years that we spent, but we really didn't realize how much it had built up in us. And God really gave us some space as we did church in our house to just breathe again.
Yeah, it's a cumulative effect, right? I mean, those things just accumulate. You didn't get there overnight. And God in his wisdom's like, you're not going to heal from that overnight. So let's just stop. Let's just stop and work through this stuff. So just again, I applaud you guys for being willing to work on his timing, not trying to force it, but just taking the time to breathe and to heal. So you've got people meeting in your home. Talk us through what that looked like and where that went.
Yes. So again, 2020, just I think for all of us, that was that year of change and a year that we all got shaken. Churches got shaken, and ours was one of the churches that got shaken. And as we came through that, and I still remember as we get to the end of the year, I'm a big guy that likes to look, hey, what's the plan for the next year? What are the things that we should look at in marking time? And some people laugh at me, like I like to plan out and think, and okay, God, what do you have for us? So as we got into that next year, and one of the books that we had read, actually, it was before even that blow up meeting. It was Francis Chan had a book called Letters to the Church, where he talked about leaving the mega church and all of the big, and then really going down into a house church and the intimacy in there and being able to focus in on those relationships, time of communion, praying. And that one had been resonating in my spirit. And as we were here really doing a house churches and we were focusing in on First and Second Corinthians was where we started out. And like, I think God has this for us, not just for a season, but to move forward in. And so today we have been doing house church in our house for 5 years now, and having the path of having open, like, hey, who does God have for us here? How do we focus in on discipling and teaching and training and equipping the families to teach and train their kids, making space for kids, allowing them to be part of ministry in ways that you can't do any larger church, and allowing God to grow that piece that in a new way that we didn't expect to ever be here, but here we are. And so, God, what do you want for us in the midst of this? And it has been such a sweet time, a powerful time where we've watched people, I'm going to call them church adjacent. Maybe they've had past church hurt and they don't want to walk through the doors of the church, but they'll come through my front door. Or maybe the concept of an institutional church is not palatable, especially to a lot of the younger generation. But hey, I can go over to this house and feel comfortable because I'm walking into a house, not into this institution. And so this house church is, again, attracted to, I'll say, the church adjacent.
And because we no longer had the weight of some of the leadership roles, obviously being treasurer took a lot of my time, being chairman of the board and elder and we had more time to look at other things. And so during this time, I also had started, in the midst of COVID when we couldn't meet, I started a ladies' Bible study for the summer outside on our property and invited threw it out on Facebook. Hey, anybody want to come for a summer Bible study? And I intended to start it for 10 weeks. And at the end of the summer, people are like, I really like this. Can we keep going? And so that has been going on now for 5 years. We have been through 24 books of the Bible together, and it's a variety of people from different stages of our lives that live close, that drive in for it. And I wouldn't have had the time to devote to that if I'd still been doing the other pieces of ministry that I was doing. And I feel like he took us from so much that was maybe transactional leadership. It needs to be done. Somebody has to do the book. Somebody has to lead the church, to things that are much more relational in nature, things that feel like they have a bigger impact on the people versus just keeping the wheels turning.
Yeah. And then I think it was the end of 22 that we had begun to feel like, hey, maybe God has something else for us. And so we have been homeschooling for
the end of 2020.
it was the end of that year. Sorry, the end of 2020. So that year of COVID, right? That God had other things for us, and we had been homeschooling since our firstborn was able to go into kindergarten. And some co-ops that Jenée had helped direct weren't able to meet in a church building, so we felt like God was asking us to take a step of faith and to put up a big building on our property so that we could also host some homeschool co-ops. And so that fall in 2021, we started a journey of inviting homeschooling families to our place to do ministry with them and teaching and equipping their kids and allowing us to have a space, no matter if we have lockdowns or whatever, that they can come to our property, come into a building, and to be able to help equip kids of all ages for their homeschool journey.
Yeah, something you said that it just really resonates is that there is such a level of institutional distrust in our culture today. I mean, it's just a fact. People just don't trust institutions. They don't trust social institutions. They don't trust government institutions. They don't trust religious institutions. And the institutional church is having a difficult time navigating that. And so there are creative expressions of church. That's one thing I love about the way God has entrusted his church to us is, I mean, yes, there are some thus saith the Lord things that we follow, but that within it, there's so much freedom. There's so many different expressions of church that are completely valid when you read the New Testament.
Yeah.
And you guys had the courage to strike out and say, we're going to try something different. And it's reaching people who, like you said, maybe totally turned off by the institutional church, but I'm not walking in a door under a steeple. I'm walking into your kitchen, and that's just a totally different thing. So it's just I love that you guys had the creativity and the courage to do that.
I'm a pretty in the box kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a people pleaser by nature. I am a perfectionist. I like to, stay inside a box where nobody's going to question what's going on and everybody thinks it's good.
Well, you're an accountant. 2 + 2 has to equal 4, right? It's just that's the way it's got to be. So I get it.
God directs our paths and gives us gifts. And so for me, it was really difficult I'd only known traditional church.
Yeah.
Only known what that model looked like. And so to step fully into, like, we were doing it again, it just kind of felt like we were biding our time to what came next. But to realize that God was asking us to step into this, I don't want to say full time, and to give it space was really scary for me because how do you tell people, yeah, we've got a church in our basement and, we're not a cult or anything weird like that. Trust us. We're going to, it almost felt like we were those weird people or whatever. I don't know, however you want to describe it. And so it took a lot of prayer for me to get to where I could be like, okay, this is, and we still talk about, like, we often are like, okay, God, let's pray through this. Like, are we still where we're supposed to be? And there are so many Sundays we have church and then we always have lunch together because we have found that just extending that day, the meal gives time for real life conversations and just being part of each other's days and weeks. And Sunday after Sunday, we almost always at the end of whatever that is, and sometimes it might be 1:30, 2 o'clock before people leave our house, we turn and look at each other and we're like, we are where we're supposed to be. We don't like how we got here. We don't like what we walked through, but God has graciously affirmed to us, like, I have you where you're supposed to be right now.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you guys were asking questions with a very open-handed posture and just willing to do whatever the Lord placed in front of you. And so I just applaud you for answering that call and doing the faithful thing, the hard thing, for walking through what felt weighty and felt like suffering, and then being able to come out on the other side with hope and truth and beauty and goodness and all of those things apparent in the way that you are doing ministry now?
And to add on to what Heather said, I totally echo what she said. If there's somebody listening or watching this podcast and you're experiencing those personal attacks, look, I have. Heather has. You can't do ministry. It's just part of it. It's just, not only are you signing up to be misunderstood, you're signing up to be attacked. It's going to happen. But I hope your story can serve as an example of saying, yes, but you don't compromise. You hold the line. You stay faithful, and God will prove himself faithful in the end. Now, there's no timetable to it. It's probably going to take longer than you want. In fact, it's guaranteed it's going to take longer than you want. But ultimately, he's going to prove faithful. I mean, that's one of my biggest takeaways of your story is, yeah, what you dealt with was horribly unfair. It was unwarranted. It was unfair. It should have never happened. But you stayed faithful, and God is using it for good. And I love that. Thank you, guys.
And I think the other thing that Stephen is, much better at living in the unresolved things.
Agree.
And we also had to get to the point to realize that some of those relationships have maybe healed some, because we're still in a small community. You still bump into people. And there are some that are still awkward and probably will be awkward forever. There are some that, have maybe healed, some that have healed but will never be the same, will never be as close and intimate as they were before. And then there are others that are still broken, and we can't fix that.
Yeah.
Nope.
And so realize.
Yeah. Paul said, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And some people make that impossible. I mean, I've experienced that in my own life. There's people from the church where I pastored 17 years. The relationships were strained. It's kind of healed to a point. There's others that it just didn't. I ran into one woman at the grocery store, and she looked up and saw me and literally turned and went the other way. I mean, she couldn't even walk by me. That's how much she hates me. And there's nothing I can do about that. And it's just, you guys are walking through that, and know that you just have to accept that.
You have to accept where you're at. And again, you only can control yourself, right? Walk in the integrity God has called you to. And, for those listening to the podcast there, God has a season. Maybe he's trying to refine you. Maybe he's trying to refine the church. Maybe he is trying to move you. I think about us leaving the church. I don't know. Obviously, this was a path of us leaving the church, but it was a difficult path. He has something different for us, but that was his plan and his path, and we don't get to pick how the path that the easy path typically isn't out there for us to be selected. It is the difficult path that refines us in the midst of that journey.
Yep. If it were easy, then God wouldn't get the glory. We would, because we could do it. And it's only in these difficult, impossible situations that God, only you can work this out. And he's like, yep. And that's exactly where I need you to be, because that's going to give me the glory. Stephen and Jenée, thank you guys so much for sharing your story. There are so many points that just resonated so strongly with me, and I know resonate with anyone who's serving in a leadership role in the local church. Thank you guys so much for the time and sharing your story today.
Thank you for having us on.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, stick around, because the conversation's not over. Mike and Heather are going to unpack everything we just heard a little bit more. But we're curious about your thoughts. How did this episode connect to your life? How does it relate to the ways you've experienced ministry? And leave a comment, leave a review. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, wow, Mike, that was a conversation that I don't know that I was fully prepared for the level of processing that I needed to do while listening to that conversation. But it was very, very impactful for me.
I had a lot of connecting points as I listened, and I know you did too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just being able to hear that perspective of a ministry wife is not one I think that I have a lot of opportunities to share with, areas in which I can talk to a fellow wife and be able to have so much in common and relate within ministry. Just some of the things that she shared, I could just feel the weight of that. Some of my own experiences where, people just are willing to share their big opinions without refinement or self-control.
Yes.
And when you're in ministry,
Yes.
it's so necessary to be able to step back, to get the perspective of the Lord, and just deny yourself. And that's what I kept thinking through all that. Like, wow, that took so much strength and reliance on God to be able to go through that suffering with grace.
Yeah, and I can't speak to it personally from a ministry spouse angle, but I can think through it through the lens of what my wife has told me when our church was going through the worst of the transition and things were tense and hard. When I was at an elders meeting, she was just on pins and needles the entire time. It was agony for her. And I knew our church had turned the corner one day when she's like, where were we? Oh yeah, that's right. You weren't at an elders meeting. It's like, it wasn't even on her mind anymore. Like, oh, we've made it. We've made it. But in the worst of those times, man, it was just so difficult for her because she knew I was probably going to get blasted at this meeting. And a lot of them I did. But yeah, I just have so much respect for Jenée, for Stephen, for how they walked through this. I didn't always walk through it as maturely as they did when I went through the stuff that we went through in our church transition. So, yeah, it's a great story of integrity, faithfulness, and God's faithfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost seems as if to have hope, suffering is required. It makes me think of like the whole Pascal mystery, and there's this life, there's this death, and then there's this resurrection. And I think that's really what we're trying to capture in these stories that we're sharing with people is there's this endurance and this faithfulness. There's this really hard, suffering, hurtful thing. But yet, when we come out on the other side of lament, there's hope and there's beauty for the ashes that feel like our lives become sometimes.
And it's probably not going to look like what you thought. You know, healing is not going to look like it. That's definitely true for me. Like, it didn't look like what I thought it was going to look like. But healing still came, and God proved himself faithful. I just had to open up my hand to let go of my plan because it just became clear it wasn't going to go my way. And that's they sat in that time of lament. They endured, and hope came in the form of a house church, which is nothing they'd probably even ever considered before. But I loved it. I loved it.
Yep. And I think that's why we're sharing the stories of ministry and whatever else has been the experience. Yeah.
Because there's a whole lot of stuff that can go and will go in that blank. If you are gonna make it in ministry, it's gonna be ministry and a lot of other stuff. But you know what? In the end, if the cross is still there and the tomb is still empty, hope is still there. You know, in the end, it's going to be okay in the end.
Yep. Yes and amen. Well, let me just say, if this story related to yours as much as it did to mine, we would love to hear from you. So please share a comment, share this story with those that you think it might relate to, and keep listening. Please keep coming back and experiencing these testaments of what the Lord has with ministry and whatever else you're experiencing.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
The Ministry and Podcast is a production of the CCL Network, hosted by Mike Edmiston and Heather Walton, produced by Jonathan Burian. The theme song is Rebels by New Alchemist. For more content, you can find us wherever podcasts are found and on YouTube at Ministry and Podcast. That's Ministry, A-N-D, Podcast. If you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at ministryand@ccleadership.org. Or you can visit ccl.network for more information about the Christian Church Leadership Network, helping churches and church leaders thrive.